At this very second, you find yourself positioned precisely at a profound threshold. I am not speaking in metaphors, nor am I using poetic figures of speech. In an absolute, literal sense, right at this exact juncture in time, you are hovering on the precipice of a doorway, a cosmic gateway that the vast majority of humanity orbits endlessly for their entire existence, yet never summons the courage to actually walk through. There is a specific inquiry that drew you to this exact place. Whether you are fully aware of this burning curiosity, or it remains buried deep within your subconscious mind, it represents the most ancient, primal question that pure consciousness has ever posed to its own reflection. The true mystery is not, who am I in this present moment, nor is it the anxiety-driven, who am I destined to become in the future? The ultimate inquiry is simply this: who was I before all of this? Long before you inhabited your current physical vessel, well before you were assigned your present name, and prior to the highly specific orchestration of life events that ultimately forged the individual staring back at you in the mirror every morning, before your lungs took in that very first gasp of air, anchoring you deeply into the unfolding narrative of your current reality. Who exactly was your soul? What was your essence before this current incarnation took hold? Understand that this question is not merely a passing thought. It is an energetic portal. The sheer reality that you are present here today, that this specific message managed to track you down in a sea of infinite noise, and that an undeniable spark ignited within your spirit when you read the title. None of this was born of random chance. There are no accidents here. What you are experiencing is pure frequency alignment. This is the metaphysical doorway swinging wide open simply because your personal energy has finally navigated to the exact vibrational coordinates where this profound truth resides. Before we dive any deeper into this journey, there is a fundamental truth you must fully grasp. The average person treats this subject as a trivial fascination, a whimsical, entertaining concept to briefly ponder during a quiet afternoon. Perhaps they once paid for a casual past life reading, or they stumbled upon an intriguing documentary exploring the mechanics of reincarnation, or maybe they experienced a nighttime vision, a dream so startlingly vivid, yet so drastically out of alignment with their current reality that it left them deeply unsettled. These individuals cautiously approach the perimeter of the mystery. They gaze at the enigma from a safe, comfortable distance. But inevitably, they pivot and retreat, scurrying back to the familiar, mundane existence they have always known. Let me be exceedingly clear. That pattern of retreat is entirely distinct from what is unfolding between us right now. What we are initiating in this moment is a definitive crossing. You gravitated toward this broadcast because a profound element within your spirit has hit an absolute point of saturation. You have arrived at a critical juncture where the fragmented, singular portrait of your identity limited solely to this one timeline fails to satisfy your soul's hunger anymore. An inner force is actively pushing, testing the constraints and limits of the narrative you have been told is your life. An essence that exists far below the surface of ordinary memory, much deeper than your constructed personality, and vastly more profound than any label society has conditioned you to accept, is aggressively surging toward the surface. That mounting pressure, that bizarre, relentless, and occasionally painful intuition whispering that you are infinitely more expansive than the meager reality this world has presented to you. That feeling is the very threshold we spoke of. And today is the day you finally discover what awaits on the opposing side. Allow me to illuminate a crucial principle regarding the true nature of boundaries. If we observe the laws of quantum mechanics, we see that a closed system does not morph from one state of being to another in a slow, gradual manner. A particle does not leisurely meander into becoming a wave, nor does energy gently coast from a lower tier to a higher one. Instead, it executes an instantaneous jump. It performs a radical, indiscrete leap, a true quantum jump, wherein the entity exists entirely within one specific framework, and in the next fraction of a microsecond, it embodies an entirely new state of existence. There exists no gray area, no gentle incline, and absolutely no cozy transitional phase where you get to linger with one foot anchored in your past self and the other testing the waters of the new. The transition is absolute. The metamorphosis is total and unyielding. This exact quantum phenomenon mirrors the evolution of human consciousness. Spiritual awakening does not happen by slowly hoarding facts and accumulating trivial data until you become a mildly upgraded version of your former self. Rather, true evolution occurs when you strike a critical threshold, a highly specific, elevated vibrational altitude, where your outdated psychological architecture shatters because it can no longer sustain the pressure, allowing an entirely new paradigm of understanding to instantly crystallize into being. The second you traverse this gateway, the individual who emerges on the other side is fundamentally and categorically distinct from the person who initially approached the entrance. Seeking the truth of your soul's identity prior to this earthly incarnation serves as one of these monumental quantum doorways. Why? Because the very instant you genuinely grasp this reality not merely as a logical concept in your brain, nor as an intellectually stimulating philosophy, but deeply woven into your cellular structure, felt within the marrow of your bones, and anchored in that silent space within you that defies all human language. The moment you authentically cross over that boundary, you permanently cease to be a mortal confined to a single lifespan. You instantly expand into a majestic, boundless entity, a being that actively wields the totality of its cosmic history. You transform into an awakened spirit that implicitly comprehends its earthly purpose, remembers its divine mission, and fully recognizes the monumental work it has been engaged in throughout the sprawling, infinite timeline of its creation. This spectacular transition is the crossing I speak of, and it is a journey we are about to embark upon side by side. However, before taking that leap, it is imperative that you comprehend the core materials constructing this doorway, simply because it is impossible to navigate a barrier that remains shrouded in ignorance. This specific portal is forged from elements that society has relentlessly conditioned the masses to reject, rationalize, and sweep under the rug, tossing it into a metaphorical bin labeled unprovable nonsense that supposedly holds no real-world value. Consequently, before we take a single step forward, we must aggressively dismantle these illusions and clear the debris of skepticism. We are obligated to examine what the tangible evidence unequivocally demonstrates. We must analyze the complex quantum mechanics governing the soul's trajectory, not as a collection of poetic allegories, but as definitive, operational mechanisms. We need to study the literal, structural framework dictating how pure awareness navigates through the vast fabric of reality. Let me share a fundamental truth I hold with absolute certainty. This gateway exists. It is profoundly real. And once your mind fully absorbs the science and soul behind its reality, making the decision to walk through it transforms from a blind leap of faith into a natural, inevitable act of self-recognition. Therefore, let us commence our exploration at the very genesis of your story, or, to be more precise, let us rewind to the epoch prior to your beginning, because long before the dawn of this current lifetime, an eternal something already existed. Let us establish a vital baseline right from the start. What I am sharing with you is not some baseless spiritual dogma, nor is it a blind religious assertion demanding your unquestioning faith. Rather, this is a profound declaration regarding the fundamental architecture of human consciousness itself. Furthermore, it is heavily fortified by some of the most exhaustive, meticulously conducted scientific investigations ever directed at the mysteries of the human mind. Consider the monumental work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who dedicated 4 uninterrupted decades of his life at the prestigious University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. His life's primary mission involved the intense investigation of young children who spontaneously and inexplicably recollected extremely vivid details of past incarnations. We are not discussing toddlers who were fed imaginative fairy tales by their parents, nor are we looking at children who were inadvertently exposed to background information or media that could logically explain away their uncanny knowledge. We are talking about toddlers, some barely 2 years of age, who suddenly began recounting entirely different lives, naming unfamiliar families, and describing the precise circumstances of their own tragic deaths. The level of granular specificity and astonishing accuracy in their testimonies utterly defied any conventional, psychological, biological, or scientific explanation. Over the course of his career, Dr. Stevenson meticulously documented and intensely investigated over 3,000 of these extraordinary cases. He did not merely take their claims at face value. He physically traveled to the remote geographical locations these children described in startling detail. He successfully tracked down the grieving families these youths claimed as their own from a previous timeline. He systematically corroborated intimate facts that these children could not possibly have accessed through any normal, earthly channel of communication. These are 3,000 verified, undeniable case studies seamlessly integrated into peer-reviewed academic literature. And you must remember, Dr. Stevenson was no mystic, nor was he a New Age spiritual guru. He was a highly methodical, profoundly skeptical academic researcher who simply allowed the empirical evidence to lead him toward an inescapable truth. This legacy of rigorous research was subsequently inherited by Dr. Jim Tucker, who has since added thousands of additional cases to this staggering repository. He cataloged children who effortlessly recited the names of former acquaintances, articulated the exact manners of their previous physical demises, and shockingly bore physical birthmarks that perfectly aligned with the fatal wounds of their past identities. These youngsters could instantly identify former relatives in photographs not because they were coached, but because they possessed an undeniable reservoir of knowledge birthed strictly from direct, lived experience in another body. As you pause before this grand cosmic gateway, this is the paramount truth you must thoroughly absorb. The empirical proof supporting the unbroken continuity of human consciousness across multiple lifetimes is by no means flimsy or anecdotal. It is definitely not a byproduct of hopeful speculation or collective wishful thinking. It is a rigorously documented, scientifically verifiable, and universally reproducible phenomenon observed across diverse cultures, spanning multiple continents and echoing throughout centuries of human history. The odyssey of your soul does not miraculously ignite at the moment of physical birth, nor does it abruptly terminate when your heart stops beating. It endures. It has always been enduring. Consequently, whatever extraordinary essence your soul possessed prior to this current incarnation has not been lost to the void. It remains actively present within your physical vessel, intricately encoded deep inside the quantum substrate of your conscious awareness, patiently waiting for you to recognize its presence. Now, we must venture even deeper into the labyrinth. The mystery of your soul's prior identity is constructed from complex layers, and each of these layers functions as a smaller, more intimate portal within the grander crossing we are undertaking. The foundational layer is this critical realization: the human soul does not function as a blank slate between earthly visits. This is precisely the nuance that the vast majority of seekers entirely misinterpret. Even among those who openly subscribe to the concept of reincarnation, there is a pervasive, flawed assumption about how the cycle operates. They envision a process where you live a full life, you expire, you experience some vague cosmic intermission, and finally, you are reborn, essentially starting from scratch. They picture the soul like a computer hard drive that gets completely reformatted between users, where the physical hardware remains intact but all previous data is wiped clean, leaving behind only the faintest residue of karmic dust linking you to your past. However, that simplistic analogy completely contradicts both the scientific evidence and the quantum mechanics governing cosmic awareness. Furthermore, it stands in direct opposition to the most profound wisdom traditions known to humanity. Whether you examine the Tibetan Buddhist interpretations of the transitional bardos, delve into the ancient Vedic conceptualizations of the eternal Atman, explore the Platonic philosophical doctrine of anamnesis, or study the complex Kabbalistic teachings of Gilgul Neshamot, none of these ancient schools ever taught the concept of spiritual erasure. What they uniformly proclaim, which aligns perfectly with modern quantum frameworks, is this indisputable fact. The soul absolutely never enters a new physical form empty-handed. It arrives to this plane overflowing. It descends into the physical realm burdened and blessed with a massive inventory of accumulated cosmic wisdom, unresolved emotional patterns, deeply ingrained preferences, highly specialized talents, lingering spiritual wounds, and a fiercely precise evolutionary agenda cultivated over countless previous lifetimes. These elements do not manifest as conventional memories or a neat filing cabinet of biographical trivia. Instead, they exist as a distinct frequency. They operate as your unique vibrational signature, the highly specific quantum blueprint that renders you unmistakably, irreducibly, and beautifully you. Take a profound moment to reflect on this reality. Ponder the intricate quirks and traits that have simply always been an inseparable part of your nature. I am not referring to the habits you consciously adopted or the behaviors hammered into you by your external environment and upbringing. I am speaking of the raw attributes that were simply there from day one. Consider the obscure subjects you passionately adored long before society instructed you to care about them. Reflect on the irrational terrors that gripped your heart before you ever had a logical reason to harbor such fear. Acknowledge the innate skills that blossomed with zero effort. The profound knowledge that seemingly downloaded into your brain without a single hour of rigorous study. And that overwhelming, magnetic sense of familiarity when you crossed paths with specific geographical locations, particular strangers, or niche philosophies. It felt less like discovering something novel and far more like coming home to a truth you had intimately known for millennia. Let me assure you, that is not merely the byproduct of a quirky personality. That is not the result of random genetic lotteries, nor is it the psychological fallout of your childhood upbringing. That phenomenon is the undeniable, heavy history of your ancient soul, aggressively bleeding through the veil, making its unignorable presence known in this current lifetime. That profound sense of deep inner knowing is precisely who you were prior to this earthly existence forcefully declaring its presence. At this exact juncture, the laws of quantum mechanics become absolutely paramount, for within the realm of advanced quantum theory, pure data, pure information, is utterly indestructible. I want to stress that this is not a poetic metaphor or a philosophical musing. This represents a foundational, unbreakable law of modern physics, the absolute conservation of quantum information. Whenever a complex quantum system experiences a radical metamorphosis, the intricate data detailing its former reality is never annihilated. Instead, it is flawlessly translated, rigorously preserved, and permanently encoded within the architecture of the fresh state. It endures relentlessly. In theory, every single fragment of this history is perfectly retrievable. The cosmos is a flawless archivist, maintaining an immaculate ledger of all that has transpired. Absolutely nothing vanishes into the void. Assuming human consciousness operates fundamentally as a complex quantum phenomenon, and an avalanche of modern scientific literature strongly argues exactly this, ranging from the Orch-Orr model championed by brilliant minds like Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, out to the rapidly expanding cutting-edge domain of quantum cognition. Then the profound data containing your past identities is permanently safeguarded. It is not wiped clean when you traverse the terrifying boundary between bodily death and subsequent rebirth. It remains thoroughly encrypted. It survives the transition intact. That ancient ledger lives within you at this very second, residing intimately inside your current biological vessel, acting as the invisible quantum scaffolding that upholds your waking awareness. You are absolutely not beginning from scratch. In truth, you have never once started over. You exist as an unbroken, torrential river of consciousness that has been cascading through eternity for an unfathomable duration. With every single physical incarnation you endure, and with every cosmic threshold you boldly navigate, you gather profound layers of spiritual depth, breathtaking complexity, and vibrant, highly specific energetic coloring. Consequently, the individual you embody right now, the distinct, unique texture of your daily perception, the exact anatomy of your supernatural talents and crippling obstacles, the unmistakable geometry of your deepest passions and darkest terrors, serves as the grand, cumulative harvest of that sprawling, epic odyssey. This realization is the magnificent gateway at which you are currently positioned. It serves as the ultimate dividing line between viewing yourself as a fragile, single-use biological entity and awakening to the breathtaking, majestic continuum of what you truly represent. If the frequency of this message is successfully penetrating your spirit, and if this burning inquiry is violently awake inside your heart right now, please take a brief moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, we ensure that our energies remain tightly aligned as we continue actively dismantling and crossing these profound thresholds together. So, what magnificent revelation awaits you just beyond this portal? Absolute piercing clarity. I am not speaking of the hazy, feel-good ambiguity often peddled by mainstream spiritualism. I am referring to a razor-sharp, fiercely specific, deeply actionable comprehension of your ultimate purpose on this planet. It is the undeniable certainty of exactly what mission you descended here to execute. It is finally deciphering why bizarre synchronicities have plagued your timeline, and conversely, why certain triumphs manifested with zero resistance. It is grasping the hidden, magnetic logic behind the individuals you are helplessly pulled toward, deciphering the origin of your unique brilliance, and accepting that your deepest emotional scars are precisely the required spiritual lacerations necessary to trigger the exact evolutionary leap your soul is aggressively pushing for. This caliber of lucidity alters the entire trajectory of your existence. This is the ultimate treasure awaiting you on the other side of the gate. At this juncture, we must dive into the fiercely controversial mechanics of how an eternal spirit actively curates its upcoming earthly experience. This is a terrifying conceptual boundary that a vast majority of humanity simply refuses to cross. Yet, it is the singular revelation that will violently rearrange your worldview once fully integrated. Long before the opening credits of your current life began rolling prior to your soul anchoring into this biological vehicle, before integrating into your specific family lineage, and before materializing into this exact socioeconomic paradigm, your higher self made a conscious, deliberate choice. Let me be brutally honest. This is not a soothing bedtime story. I am not offering this perspective as a psychological band-aid to merely comfort you over the agonizing traumas you have weathered. Rather, this outlines the stark, literal architecture of how the reincarnation cycle truly operates. This deliberate selection process is corroborated by every profound mystical tradition that has ever probed the mysteries of existence. It is also massively reinforced by compounding clinical evidence, from pediatric past life recollections and clinical near-death experience, NDE testimonies, to profound insights extracted during deep hypnotic regression therapy. Countless individuals who have briefly pierced the veil into the interlife staging area and managed to return all echo this identical chilling reality. Your eternal essence actively selected this specific lifetime. It handpicked your physical form. It meticulously selected your family tree, fully aware of both its radiant beauty and its toxic, generational dysfunction. It elected to arrive during this exact, chaotic epoch in human history, plunging into this specific cultural landscape and adopting this highly unique blend of environmental variables. None of this was left to the roll of the dice. There was absolutely zero randomness involved. It was executed with frightening, surgical precision, driven by an elevated clarity of purpose that our fragile human intellect, shackled by the dense limitations of a mortal brain, can barely begin to fathom. Naturally, the screaming question arises: why on earth would a divine being willingly sign up for such immense difficulty? Why intentionally volunteer for excruciating emotional agony? Why deliberately select the grueling, agonizing gauntlet of challenges you have personally endured? The answer is beautifully brutal. The eternal soul possesses absolutely zero interest in optimizing for earthly comfort. It is exclusively optimizing for radical growth, relentless evolution, and the dramatic expansion of raw consciousness. That level of spiritual ascension demands a highly precise dosage of friction, an exact measure of psychological pressure, and a perfectly calibrated cocktail of devastating hardships and transcendent gifts. Remember, a flawless diamond is never birthed in a relaxing, gentle environment. It is forged in the fires of unimaginable, crushing geological pressure, a force so overwhelmingly brutal that basic, unremarkable carbon is violently forced to mutate into an indestructible gem, capable of refracting light. Your ancient, infinite soul understands this brutal alchemy perfectly, the transitional realm bridging one physical existence to the next. The ethereal gap your consciousness inhabited mere moments before plunging into the density of this current biological lifetime is defined by a state staggering, absolute hyperlucidity. It is an elevated plateau of pure awareness, where the eternal spirit can observe its own intricate behavioral loops, its sprawling evolutionary trajectory, and its vast repository of unfinished spiritual business with microscopic, flawless precision. Operating from this omniscient vantage point, the soul makes its definitive selections. It meticulously engineers the exact environmental constraints, biological limitations, and psychological hurdles guaranteed to cultivate the absolute maximum threshold of necessary growth. This staggering realization constitutes the second profound layer of our crossing, because the instant you authentically integrate this truth, not merely as an abstract philosophical concept rattling around in your intellect, but as an undeniable, vibrating reality pumping through your veins, every single aspect of your waking reality undergoes a radical metamorphosis. That excruciatingly difficult relationship suddenly morphs from a cruel twist of fate into a deliberately constructed masterclass in spiritual resilience. That maddening, cyclical loop of failure or heartbreak is recontextualized as a highly specific, customized curriculum. The deep-seated emotional trauma that has stalked you relentlessly since your earliest childhood memories ceases to act as proof of your inherent brokenness. Instead, it stands as a magnificent testament to your soul's unfathomable bravery, having intentionally volunteered for the exact crucible required to forge its next evolutionary leap. And the architecture of this grand design becomes even more terrifyingly precise. Your higher self did not merely curate your environmental circumstances. It specifically drafted your co-stars, the pivotal individuals who have anchored your narrative, those who have showered you with the most transcendent, unconditional love, alongside those who have inflicted the most devastating, earth-shattering agony upon your heart, are not random extras who stumbled onto your stage by accident. They are ancient travel companions. They are eternal counterparts with whom you have drafted sacred, pre-incarnational contracts. These are kindred spirits whose own spiritual ascensions are inextricably woven into yours across an infinite tapestry of lifetimes, surviving myriad deaths and rebirths within the colossal, collaborative theater of the universe, actively evolving itself through the friction of human relationships. The revered Tibetan Buddhist lineages refer to these profound entanglements as heavy karmic bonds. Ancient Vedic texts describe them as deeply rooted soul families. Meanwhile, the esoteric mystery schools of the West characterize them as specialized soul groups. Yet, regardless of the cultural vocabulary utilized, the foundational truth remains startlingly identical. We absolutely never navigate the void alone. We traverse eternity in tightly knit constellations of consciousness. We repeatedly gravitate back to one another, purposefully selecting the same energetic counterparts incarnation after incarnation, constantly swapping the theatrical masks we wear. In one timeline, you play the nurturing parent. In the next, the rebellious child. You pivot from the wise mentor to the naive student, from the devoted lover to the ultimate betrayer who abruptly walks away. Yet, every single dynamic operates in absolute servitude to the identical, overarching evolutionary mandate that your collective souls share. Take a profound moment to bring to mind the one specific individual who has seismically altered the landscape of your life. Visualize the person whose mere existence has catalyzed the most violent, irreversible transformation within your psyche. regardless of whether that growth blossomed from pure joy or agonizing devastation. Can you sense the unfathomable depth of that invisible tether? Can you feel how its immense gravity entirely eclipses anything that a few brief decades on this planet could possibly justify? Can you detect the ancient, almost ghostly texture of that bond, that overwhelming intuition screaming that this is not a fresh acquaintance, but rather a profoundly ancient reunion? That gut-wrenching feeling is pure recognition. It is your immortal soul actively accessing a classified cosmic databank that your logical human brain has not yet been granted permission to read. It is the unadulterated quantum data of your shared cosmic history, aggressively bleeding through the veil into your conscious waking state. This leads us to an incredibly urgent realization. The mystery regarding who you were prior to your physical birth is not merely an exercise in historical trivia. It is far more than a fascinating archaeological dig into your past lives. It is a breathing, pulsating, immediately critical inquiry, simply because the entity your soul was then is precisely the essence your soul embodies right now. Your past incarnations are not cleanly finalized, chapters neatly bound in a dusty book. They form the living, breathing foundation of the very sentence you are speaking today. They are vividly alive within your natural brilliance, your deepest psychological wounds, your magnetic attractions, your visceral revulsions, your inescapable habits, and your sharpest intuitions. They are fully operational. They dictate the architecture of your daily reality in ways both imperceptible and overwhelmingly profound. Herein lies the ultimate portal that swings wide open upon realizing this truth. You permanently resign from your role as a helpless hostage to your cyclical traumas, and you rise as the sovereign navigator of your destiny. Because the second you recognize that the relentless hardship terrorizing your timeline is not a cosmic punishment, nor a reflection of your personal inadequacy, but rather the bleeding edge of a spiritual thesis your soul has been painstakingly researching across centuries, everything changes. You can finally lean into the pain consciously. You can begin to demand answers of the universe. What specific lesson is this nightmare trying to finalize? What unresolved debt did my spirit drag into this dimension to clear? What grand, evolutionary milestone is this agonizing challenge actively building toward? Those piercing, vital, electrifying inquiries are the very engines of your spiritual crossing. They represent the exact method by which you step through the gateway, leaving behind a life where you are merely a puppet of your past, and entering a paradigm where you command the full, terrifying depth of your cosmic power. So, before we move forward, I want to pause the momentum and ask you a deeply intimate question. Reflect on your journey up to this exact second. Have you ever experienced a singular, defining moment in your earthly existence where you didn't just guess, you didn't just hope, but you absolutely knew in the very marrow of your bones that you had permanently crossed an event horizon, a definitive point of no return? Reflect on a singular, defining instance where reality simply fractured and reorganized itself instantaneously. A visceral moment where the earlier version of your identity was permanently deleted, entirely inaccessible to whoever you became a second later. I invite you to drop a brief mention of that exact moment down in the comments below. You do not need to justify it or provide a lengthy explanation. Simply declare its existence. The very act of naming a spiritual threshold serves as your initial step toward mastering its power. Now, allow me to share the remarkable journey of a woman named Mira. Mira had just turned 34 when she first began to be haunted by a pervasive, unshakable sensation she could only articulate as a profound dissonance. It wasn't a dissonance born of tangible tragedy or external failure. On paper, her waking world was perfectly acceptable, even enviable by societal standards. She held a respectable career where she performed with quiet competence. Her social sphere and romantic entanglements functioned smoothly. If she were to summarize her daily routine to a stranger, it would sound wonderfully stable and thoroughly adequate. Yet, lingering in the shadows of her psyche, Mira harbored an inescapable intuition. It was a haunting suspicion that she had somehow been cast in the wrong play, Lurking just beneath the mundane veneer of her daily routine, she sensed a parallel version of herself, a deeper, wildly authentic, and infinitely more vibrant identity that remained agonizingly out of reach. This phantom sensation had trailed her since infancy. Even as a young girl, she would occasionally stare down at her own hands and feel a jarring sense of alienation, as if she were trapped inside a biological costume that was tailored almost perfectly, yet fundamentally foreign to her true essence. Then, there were the nighttime visions. These were absolutely not your standard, chaotic manifestations of a processing brain. She certainly had those mundane dreams as well, but there existed a highly classified, distinct tier of visions that vibrated on an entirely different frequency. These were visceral immersions into a bustling, ancient metropolis she had never set foot in during her current life. The sunlight in this city possessed a highly specific, heavy, golden quality, a visual signature she recognized with the same instant familiarity as the comforting scent of her childhood bedroom. She experienced dreams where she fluently conversed in a dialect completely alien to her waking mind. She endured visions of cradling an infant, a child who did not belong to her in this timeline, yet whom she fiercely adored in the dreamscape with an overwhelming, primal ferocity that would leave her physically trembling and drenched in sweat upon waking. She also dreamt of her own passing. It was never a brutal or violent end. Rather, it was a profound completion, mimicking the gentle snuffing out of a candle's flame, followed instantly by an ocean of incomprehensible peace. For years, Mira guarded these visions fiercely, never uttering a syllable about them to another living soul. She safely categorized them into a mental vault reserved for inexplicable phenomena that were best ignored so she could function in normal society. However, upon reaching her 34th year, the cosmic tectonic plates shifted. The nocturnal visions surged in both frequency and intensity. That quiet hum of dissonance escalated into a deafening roar. Finally, during one quiet evening, she found herself completely stripped of her defenses, forced to sit with the terrifying inquiry she had actively dodged for decades. Who was I before I became this? She didn't rush out to hire a past life regression hypnotherapist. She didn't seek the counsel of a psychic medium or desperately search for external validation. She simply surrendered to the question. She allowed the heavy inquiry to permeate her physical space. She let it breathe, and then, something brilliantly subtle began to unfold. The universe did not deliver her answers via a cinematic lightning strike or a booming voice from the heavens. The truth trickled in through a cascade of micro-recognitions. The vivid memory of her dream city suddenly dovetailed perfectly with a highly specific historical epoch, an era she had recently found herself obsessively researching for absolutely no logical reason. An innate talent she had always possessed, a bizarre, naturally gifted aptitude for complex spatial reasoning, suddenly clicked into place when viewed through the lens of an ancient artisan craft she had never practiced in this life. When she finally encountered imagery of this craft, it struck her like a thunderbolt of homecoming. Furthermore, she finally decoded a heavy, ambient sorrow that had forever weighed on her chest. It was the distinct agony of being prematurely separated from something deeply cherished. This inexplicable grief, which had stubbornly resisted all psychological analysis in her current life, suddenly made perfect sense when contextualized as the tragic fallout from a lifetime lived long before her current birth. Mira was not handed a neatly typed, chronological biography of her former existence. The spiritual realm rarely operates with such neatness. Instead, she was gifted something vastly more potent. She was handed the energetic thread. She finally grasped the highly specific, evolutionary narrative her ancient soul had been painstakingly weaving across the tapestry of multiple incarnations. This exact thread was the very force that had magnetically dragged her into her current biological form, her specific family dynamic, and her exact socio-economic reality. For the very first time, she understood the true origin of that lifelong wrongness. It wasn't because her current life was a failure. It was because her spirit was lugging around the massive, unresolved baggage of an interrupted passion from her past. It was a burning, desperate yearning for a specific avenue of creative expression that had been brutally cut short in a prior century, a mission her soul had deliberately reincarnated to resurrect and finalize. The dissonance was never a medical diagnosis or a sign of depression. It was a highly calibrated compass. The precise millisecond Mira internalized this truth the moment she bravely stepped through that cosmic gateway. Her entire universe reoriented itself. This radical shift didn't instantly materialize as a brand new house or a sudden influx of wealth. The transformation occurred internally. She finally ceased her exhausting battle against the river's current. She stopped agonizing over her inability to squeeze her vast spirit into a societal mold that was never designed to hold her. Instead, she grabbed hold of that ancient thread. She began actively migrating toward the exact monumental task her soul had descended into this dense dimension to achieve. This is the ultimate promise of crossing the threshold. This is the magnificent reality thriving on the other side of the gate. You finally stop thrashing against the cosmic tide, and you begin swimming in harmony with its immense power. And as it turns out, that relentless current has been steadily guiding you toward a breathtaking, meticulously designed destination since the very beginning of time. At this critical juncture, we must actively pivot our focus toward the literal mechanics of accessing this hidden data. What we are engaging in right now is absolutely not an exercise in idle philosophical debate or abstract intellectualism. This is a highly practical, actionable transmission, and the profound inquiry that guided your spirit to this exact moment demands a tangible, operational answer. How, exactly, do you strip away the veil to uncover the identity your soul possessed before it anchored into your current physical form? The solution does not lie in a single, rigid, one-size-fits-all formula. Rather, it exists as a magnificent, shimmering constellation of distinct approaches. Each individual method serves as a unique skeleton key, unlocking a slightly different doorway that ultimately leads into the exact same cosmic chamber of truth. I am going to carefully walk you through these specific methodologies because different eternal spirits are biologically and energetically wired to receive data through vastly different channels. Your personal frequency, the specific channel that remains the most porous, the most receptive, and the most perfectly aligned with the unique architectural layout of your waking consciousness, will invariably resonate with one of these practices. The first pathway, the art of resonance mapping. This initial approach involves the deliberate, systematic cataloging of the external stimuli that trigger an illogical, overwhelming sense of belonging or recognition within your physical body. We are not talking about the hobbies you have consciously adopted over the years, nor are we discussing the cultural tastes society has programmed you to appreciate. We are zeroing in on the specific phenomena that strike your nervous system with a terrifying intensity, an impact that completely eclipses any rational explanation rooted in your current biological timeline. Consider your unexplainable affinities for highly specific historical epochs. Think about your magnetic pull toward remote geographical territories you have never physically visited, or your immediate, effortless fluency in ancient crafts, esoteric arts, and complex disciplines. Reflect on the bizarrely specific archetypes of people or communities you are helplessly drawn toward, or the obscure spiritual and philosophical frameworks that feel instantly native to your mind. Pay incredibly close attention to languages. Occasionally, you might hear the cadence of a foreign tongue you have never studied a day in your life, yet a primal frequency stirs violently deep within your chest. This sensation is not a mere aesthetic appreciation for the sound of the words. It is an infinitely more intimate vibration. It closely mirrors the electric, hyper-alert sensation of hearing someone shout your own true name across a crowded, deafening room. These intense spikes of resonance are emphatically not random quirks of your personality. They are the literal, undeniable fingerprints of your soul, violently pressing against the fabric of time, bleeding through from previous incarnations directly into your current reality. They are the raw, unadulterated quantum data of your ancient cosmic history, perfectly encrypted within your spontaneous, present-moment emotional reactions. When you begin to map these energetic spikes systematically, when you gather the sprawling, chaotic constellation of your inexplicable affinities and force yourself to observe them as a unified whole, a breathtaking portrait begins to materialize. It will not present itself as a neatly typed, chronological biography, but rather as a distinct, undeniable energetic signature. It is the unmistakable spiritual barcode of who your soul has been throughout eternity. Here is exactly how you execute this practice. You are going to cultivate what I refer to as a resonance ledger. Sit down before a completely blank canvas, be it a pristine sheet of paper, an empty digital document, or simply the vast, quiet sanctuary of your own meditative mind. Begin the meticulous process of listing every single historical era that has ever felt hauntingly familiar to your spirit. Document every foreign culture that has enchanted you, far beyond what your current ethnic or geographical background could ever justify. Catalog every obscure skill or niche discipline that blossomed within you with zero friction, or that you fell in love with too deeply, too fast. Write down the exact archetypal traits of the individuals who have consistently magnetized your soul. Record every recurring motif in your nighttime visions that carries the heavy, dense texture of a lived memory rather than the fleeting fluff of a fabricated dream. Note every geographical location you have traveled to where the moment your feet touched the soil, your heart screamed that you were returning, not merely arriving. List the emotional wounds that feel far too colossal to have been generated solely by your current life experiences. Acknowledge the brilliant gifts and talents that seem to pour forth from a reservoir much deeper than your personal, earthly history. You must aggressively list every single fragment of it, and once the ledger is full, you observe it. However, you absolutely must not analyze this data with your sterile, logical brain. Do not allow your analytical mind to frantically try and stitch together a neat, linear Hollywood script. Instead, you must observe this map using the ancient, silent part of your being that already holds the answers, the suppressed entity that has been relentlessly hammering against the walls of your current lifetime, begging to be acknowledged. Look at your resonance ledger through the eyes of your eternal self, and simply allow the overarching pattern to organically reveal itself to you. I assure you, the pattern will not be tidy. It will not mimic a conventional novel complete with a clean beginning, a structured middle, and a satisfying end. It will manifest as a pure frequency. It will emerge as a highly specific, humming vibrational signature that weaves its way through every seemingly disconnected data point, linking them together with such absolute, undeniable logic that once your mind finally perceives the connection, it becomes permanently impossible to unsee. That specific frequency is your prior identity, aggressively tearing through the veil, demanding to be recognized in the present tense. The second pathway, the practice of threshold dreaming. This technique is a highly specialized, intentional manipulation of the hypnagogic state, the mysterious, twilight frontier bridging the realms of conscious wakefulness and deep slumber. This specific psychological corridor has been actively weaponized and revered across countless ancient cultures and spanning thousands of years as the ultimate gateway into the deepest, most subterranean layers of human consciousness. The hypnagogic state is a literal quantum threshold in the most absolute sense of the word. It is the precise, fleeting window where the relentless, skeptical filtering mechanisms of your waking ego finally exhaust themselves and relax. In this vulnerable space, the rigid fortress walls separating your personal, daily subconscious from the massive, boundless, transpersonal reservoir of cosmic consciousness become highly permeable. It is the exact moment when classified, quantum information data that remains entirely locked away from your daytime awareness is finally granted permission to float to the surface. Here is the exact protocol for this practice. In the late hours of the evening, when your physical vessel is genuinely fatigued but your mind has not yet completely surrendered to the abyss of sleep, arrange your body in a resting position. Ensure it is a posture where you can successfully maintain a delicate thread of conscious awareness for a few precious minutes before slumber inevitably overtakes you. As you hover in this liminal space, you must plant a single, crystalline question directly in the dead center of your awareness. Do not formulate a highly complex, multi-layered puzzle. It must be a brutally simple, razor-sharp directive. Implant a phrase such as, "Show me exactly what I need to comprehend about who I have been," or perhaps, "Allow my spirit to physically feel the ancient thread that anchors this current timeline to the ones that preceded it," or simply, "Who existed before this lifetime?" The crucial secret to this practice is how you handle the inquiry. You must hold the question with extreme gentleness. Do not grip it with desperate anxiety, and absolutely do not aggressively demand an instantaneous revelation. You are not interrogating the universe. You are delicately extending a formal, cosmic invitation. Once you have planted that delicate inquiry, you must completely surrender control and allow the hypnagogic twilight to simply wash over you. As the rigid boundaries of your waking mind dissolve, fractured images, fleeting scenes, and abstract sensations will begin to bubble up to the surface. Your only job in this moment is to observe. Do not attempt to forcefully direct the narrative like a movie director, and do not try to desperately analyze the meaning of the symbols as they appear. You must simply act as a silent witness, offering these visions the same breathless, gentle attention you would give to a fragile, ancient artifact being unearthed from the soil. The moment you awaken the following morning, before you check your phone, before you speak a single word, and before the dense reality of your current life hardens around you, you must immediately write down every surviving fragment of the experience. Do not merely document the visual content, the locations, or the faces. You must meticulously record the emotional gravity of the dream. Document the distinct atmospheric texture, the haunting sensation of absolute familiarity or bizarre alienation, and any highly specific sensory details that inexplicably felt anchored in profound truth. Over an extended period of time, after dedicating weeks and ultimately months to this sacred discipline, a spectacular alchemy occurs. The chaotic, isolated threshold dreams begin to aggressively coalesce. The seemingly random puzzle pieces interlock, and the vivid, undeniable portrait of who your ancient soul once was will finally snap into razor-sharp focus. The third pathway, somatic excavation, body archaeology. This is arguably the most fiercely overlooked methodology on our list. Yet, in many respects, it serves as the most immediate and undeniable access point. Why? Because your physical body is not merely a disposable biological rental car meant solely to navigate this current decade. Your body is a breathing, cellular archive. The human vessel faithfully stores the heavy imprints of your soul's sprawling history directly within its tissues, its intricate patterns of muscular armor, and its chronic holding patterns. It manifests as inexplicable, deeply visceral reactions to highly specific external triggers, or as localized regions of chronic physical tension that completely baffle modern doctors because they possess zero verifiable origin in your current medical history. The ancient Tibetan spiritual traditions have spoken of this phenomenon with absolute clarity for millennia. They have long taught that highly specific physical anomalies, birthmarks, and ingrained somatic tendencies present in your current form are literal echoes, physical reverberations, reflecting profound events and traumas endured during previous incarnations. Dr. Ian Stevenson's monumental academic research verified this ancient wisdom with chilling, empirical rigor. He documented thousands of instances where birthmarks perfectly mirrored the fatal wounds of a deceased personality, where physical reflexes flawlessly replicated the specialized muscle memory of past lives, and where physiological panic responses to specific stimuli could only be rationally explained by referencing a prior timeline. Your body absolutely knows. Your nervous system remembers. The flesh is carrying the eternal ledger. Somatic excavation is the intentional, disciplined practice of learning how to decipher that biological record. The process initiates with a radically simple, internal audit. Close your eyes and ask your physical form, where exactly am I storing an energy, a tension, or a sensation that definitively does not belong to the timeline of my current life? Pinpoint the exact coordinates of that chronic contraction or dense energy the phantom ache that cannot be traced back to a childhood injury or a recent trauma. Observe the specific environments, types of physical touch, or auditory frequencies that trigger a disproportionate, explosive reaction within your nervous system. A reaction that completely eclipses anything your current life experiences could possibly justify. Crucially, you must stop treating these physiological anomalies as defects that need to be aggressively medicated or instantly fixed. They are not problems. They are highly concentrated, encrypted data points demanding to be read. They represent your body's desperate attempt to drag your soul's unprocessed, ancient history into the glaring light of the present moment, so it can finally be acknowledged, deciphered, and integrated. When you bathe these areas of chronic tension in radical, compassionate curiosity, when you stop trying to force the pain to disappear, and instead humbly ask the tissue what ancient secret it is guarding the body, responds. It rarely answers with spoken language or a neatly typed paragraph. Instead, it will hit you with a sudden flash of profound imagery, an overwhelming wave of displaced emotion, or an instantaneous, staggering sense of deep knowing that erupts from a place far beneath the confines of the logical brain. The fourth pathway, interlife, quantum regression. We now arrive at the most aggressively direct, yet undeniably the most psychologically demanding avenue available, the profound practice of between-life regression. This specific, highly structured modality was pioneered, refined, and exhaustively documented by Dr. Michael Newton throughout his decades of groundbreaking clinical work utilizing deep-state hypnotic regression. This practice does not merely stop at exploring a past life. It involves safely guiding human consciousness backwards, straight through the traumatic threshold of a previous physical death, and directly into the ethereal staging ground, the dimension of pure, unadulterated soul awareness that exists in the sacred void between earthly incarnations. Dr. Newton's staggering body of work, meticulously detailed in his foundational texts Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls, easily represents the most comprehensive, scientifically rigorous, and logically consistent cartography of the afterlife ever extracted from direct human testimony. He hypnotically regressed thousands of individual subjects hailing from vastly different socio-economic backgrounds, completely opposing cultural frameworks, and aggressively conflicting religious belief systems. Many of these patients possessed zero prior interest in spirituality or reincarnation. Yet, while submerged in the deepest states of trance, they all mechanically describe the exact same, highly specific architectural framework of the interlife dimension with a level of consistency that defies any skeptical explanation. What this massive collective of subjects universally described was this undeniable sequence of events, the continuation. Following the cessation of biological heartbeats, pure consciousness does not evaporate. It fluidly transitions, the objective audit. The soul immediately enters a profound process of life review, a fiercely clear-eyed, microscopic examination of the incarnation that just concluded. Crucially, this is not a tribunal of cosmic judgment or punishment, but a neutral, hyper-accelerated classroom for spiritual extraction and learning. The reunion. The spirit then seamlessly navigates back to its specific soul group, the deeply familiar, ancient constellation of entities it has traveled the cosmos with since the dawn of creation. The blueprinting phase. Engaging directly with vastly more advanced, elder guides, the soul enters a state of meticulous planning. It deliberately selects the biological constraints, familial dynamics, and precise geographical circumstances of its next incarnation, ensuring maximum evolutionary friction, the plunge. Finally, the entity willfully hurls itself back through the agonizing threshold of biological birth. As it descends, it carries its entire cosmic history flawlessly encoded within its quantum signature, the full, devastating weight of its accumulated wisdom and its ironclad evolutionary agenda. Between life regression stands as an unparalleled earth-shattering tool specifically because it forcefully bypasses the dense, distracting layers of your current personal ego. It completely sidesteps the chatter of your everyday human history, allowing you to access the terrifying, magnificent perspective of your eternal soul directly at its absolute source. Deep within this suspended interlife dimension, the eternal soul experiences an absolute, crystalline comprehension of itself. There are no shadows, no suppressed traumas, and no egoic blind spots. It possesses an instantaneous, encyclopedic recall of its entire historical trajectory across thousands of individual incarnations. It holds complete clarity regarding the precise evolutionary mandate it is currently attempting to fulfill. Most importantly, it understands exactly why it deliberately curated the specific, excruciating challenges and breathtaking triumphs that define your present earthly reality. When guided by a master facilitator during a deep state regression, that profound, suppressed cosmic knowing becomes fully accessible and downloadable directly into your waking consciousness. However, I must be completely transparent. This highly advanced modality is emphatically not for everyone. It is not a casual weekend experiment. It demands a highly trained, ethical facilitator. It requires rigorous, disciplined psychological preparation, and it necessitates absolute, divine timing. But for the specific souls for whom this is the correct gateway, it provides the most visceral, unadulterated, and immediate resolution to the agonizing question of who you truly were before you drew your first breath in this body. Now, I am going to carefully guide you through an active, practical exercise, a visceral, threshold-crossing visualization designed to forcefully turn the handle on this gateway right here, in this exact moment, regardless of which of the four methodologies we discussed ultimately evolves into your primary conduit for cosmic data. You must understand that what we are about to do is not a passive, relaxing meditation. This is a deliberate, structural crossing of a spiritual boundary. Therefore, I demand your absolute presence. I need your fierce willingness to participate. I need you to summon the exact, ancient fragment of your spirit that dragged you to this video in the first place, the very essence that felt a violent tremor of recognition when it encountered this transmission. Pull that aspect of yourself to the forefront of your mind. Right now, first, adjust your physical vessel into a posture that is both deeply relaxed yet fiercely alert. If you are currently lying down, remain exactly where you are, but ensure you do not cross your arms or legs. If you are seated, forcefully straighten your spine, allowing it to act as an antenna. Let your hands rest open, palms facing upward, signaling absolute receptivity. If it feels safe and natural, gently allow your eyelids to fall closed. Alternatively, if you prefer to keep them open, soften your gaze into a blurred, unfocused stare at a fixed point in the distance. You are going to take 3 monumental breaths. I am not talking about shallow, performed, chest-level breathing. I am demanding actual, biological, full-capacity respiration. Draw the air deeply, pulling it all the way down into the lowest chambers of your lungs, forcing your abdomen to expand outward, inflating your physical frame entirely. As you forcefully exhale, command your nervous system to release its grip. Demand that the frantic, buzzing surface tension of this specific day physically melt away from your skin. Give yourself permission to let the mundane, screaming anxieties of this single lifetime become momentarily muted. Visualize these daily concerns receding rapidly into the background, shrinking down until they look like a tiny, insignificant cluster of city lights viewed from an airplane cruising at 30,000 feet. They still exist, they are still real, but they are no longer permitted to consume the totality of your awareness. You are now standing directly before a massive, invisible threshold. You can feel its intense gravity. It might not register as a literal physical touch, but rather as a heavy, electric density in the room, a highly charged, magnetic frequency that signals you are hovering at the sheer edge of a profound precipice. A colossal gateway looms directly in front of you. While your biological eyes cannot perceive its structure, your ancient spirit can map its exact dimensions. You can physically feel the violent shift in atmospheric pressure separating this side from the other. On this side, the ground you are currently anchored to lies the mundane, the familiar, and the painfully known. It is the cramped, claustrophobic reality of the single, fleeting lifetime you have been occupying. On the far side, pulsing just millimeters beyond that invisible threshold, lies the magnificent, boundless theater of your larger truth. It holds the complete, unedited mosaic, the sprawling, accumulated majesty of your eternal existence. This gateway is forged entirely from pure, solid light. However, it is not the weak, transient light of this material world. It is not the harsh glare of the sun, nor the artificial glow of a bulb. It is an infinitely older, denser, and more profound illumination. It is the raw, untethered radiation that exists exclusively within the sacred void between physical lives. And it stands wide open. It has been patiently waiting for your arrival for centuries. The exact millisecond your heart generated this inquiry with brutal, authentic intention, the locks disengaged. Now, you must begin to advance toward it. Do not attempt to move your physical body. Leave your biological vessel anchored securely where it rests. Instead, project your pure, conscious awareness forward. Command the eternal, sovereign aspect of your spirit, the part that vastly predates this current identity, to aggressively step toward the light. As you close the distance, your energetic field will begin to react. You might experience a sudden, overwhelming surge of heat radiating from your core. You might feel a terrifying, exhilarating sensation of rapid expansion, as if your energy is forcefully ballooning outward, shattering the fragile, microscopic boundaries of your human skin and the limitations of your current timeline. You may be hit by a violent tidal wave of unexplainable emotion, a crushing wave of absolute recognition, a desperate, ancient longing, or a profound, weeping sense of relief. Whatever frequency crashes over you in this moment, let it happen. Do not let your logical brain try to categorize, label, or explain it away. Simply surrender to its presence. You have finally reached the gate. You are now hovering perfectly balanced on the razor-thin threshold dividing the mortal you believe yourself to be today and the immortal titan you have always been throughout the epochs. From this exact energetic coordinate, standing at this highly specific vibrational address, you can finally tap into the master frequency of your grander narrative. Do not expect this truth to present itself as a neat slideshow of historical images or a chronologically accurate biographical textbook. Expect it to hit you as a pure, overwhelming frequency. It will wash over you as the undeniable, foundational essence of the specific cosmic entity you are. It is the raw, unmistakable psychological texture that has remained constant across thousands of lifetimes. It is your ultimate, unforgeable spiritual signature, the exact vibration that makes you irreducibly, beautifully you, completely, regardless of which biological suit you happen to be wearing, which ancient century you incarnated into, or what superficial cultural masks you were forced to adopt. Breathe in and feel that signature now. Lock on to the singular, undeniable truth that has served as your eternal North Star. Dig beneath the fragile facade of your current personality. Dig beneath the toxic conditioning of this present timeline. Strip away every single label, trauma, and achievement that mere circumstance has glued to you. Feel the raw, thrumming power of what existed before any of it. Tap into the razor-sharp, specific flavor of your deepest awareness. Observe the highly unique, idiosyncratic way your consciousness chooses to navigate the universe. Recognize that your profound, unexplainable passions and your terrifying, natural gifts are absolutely not the meager accomplishments of this one short life. They are the magnificent, accumulated harvest of your eternal nature. Do not envision your past self as a mere actor donning different costumes in some grand, dusty, historical drama. What we are talking about is a highly specific quality of pure consciousness. It is a razor-sharp, completely unique frequency of awareness. This is the undeniable, unforgeable energetic signature of your spirit. This exact vibration has been the core of your identity across every single incarnation you have ever endured. Furthermore, it will remain your definitive essence across all the infinite lifetimes you have yet to experience. And most urgently, this is who you are right now, breathing inside this current biological shell. forcefully pushing through the mundane static of your everyday awareness, desperately demanding to be fully recognized. Linger in this profound space for just a moment longer. Command this realization to bypass the superficial, analytical chatter of your logical brain. Let it sink infinitely deeper, permanently settling directly into the marrow of your bones and the nucleus of your cells. Allow this to transcend being merely a fascinating philosophical idea. Let it mutate into a visceral, lived experience. You must finally accept that you are absolutely not just a random human being stumbling through a single, isolated timeline. You are an ancient, majestic soul embarked on an unimaginably vast cosmic expedition. You are merely renting this specific physical form during this exact epoch in human history to achieve a highly specialized, fiercely important evolutionary objective. And this magnificent soul, the true essence that constitutes you, has been executing this grand design for an unfathomably long time. You have spent millennia relentlessly learning, expanding, and hoarding cosmic wisdom. You have expertly navigated countless spiritual thresholds, boldly stepping through imposing gateways, and arriving on the opposing side profoundly transformed, vastly deepened, and infinitely more authentic with every single crossing. You have absolutely performed this ritual before. You have stood before the abyss of the unknown in prior centuries. You have traversed these boundaries time and time again, and with every leap of faith, you emerged more aligned with your ultimate truth than the moment before you stepped through. This current moment is simply another one of those monumental crossings, and you are actively executing it right now. Whenever you feel truly ready, begin the gentle process of pulling your conscious awareness back into the physical dimensions of this room, back into the dense gravity of this current body, and back into the ticking clock of this present moment. However, do not abandon the profound treasures you just unearthed in the ether. Drag them back across the threshold with you. Carry this heavy, golden truth forward into the rest of your current timeline, utilizing it as an impenetrable new layer of comprehension. Let it serve as a breathtaking new depth of self-actualization and a razor-sharp clarity regarding exactly why you materialized on this planet and who you have consistently been since the dawn of creation. Take a deep, grounding breath. Feel the undeniable heavy mass of your physical form. Feel the solid earth supporting you from beneath. And when the moment feels absolute, slowly open your eyes. Welcome to the other side. Now, we must meticulously dissect exactly what transforms in the aftermath of this transition, because making the crossing does not signify the conclusion of your epic journey. Rather, it marks the genesis of an entirely new methodology for navigating the remainder of your existence. I intend to be brutally precise regarding the literal, psychological shifts that occur once you authentically step over this boundary, when you graduate from viewing yourself as a fragile, one-life mortal, to fully grasping the sprawling, magnificent arc of your eternal nature. The absolute first paradigm shift revolves around your relationship to your own toxic cycles and recurring behavioral loops. Every single human being on this planet is plagued by deeply entrenched patterns, repetitive themes sabotaging their romances, cyclical financial or emotional struggles, identical trauma responses, and default mechanisms for surviving the world. Prior to crossing this threshold, these relentless loops are universally perceived as devastating problems. They are viewed as humiliating character flaws, glaring evidence of psychological brokenness, or proof of some inherent inadequacy. You find yourself trapped in the exact same toxic relationship dynamic over and over. You violently crash into the identical invisible obstacle year after year. You are haunted by the same irrational terror, or plagued by the same desperate, unexplainable yearning in environments that offer zero logical justification for such intense feelings. Without the vital context of your soul's sprawling historical background, these repetitive cycles feel like cruel cosmic indictments, painful evidence suggesting that you are fundamentally failing at the basic task of being a functional, healthy human adult. But once you establish residence on the other side of this gate, your relationship to those agonizing patterns undergoes a total, radical metamorphosis. You finally comprehend that the brutal cycle is absolutely not a flaw in your design. It is a highly advanced, customized spiritual curriculum. It represents the exact, unresolved evolutionary homework that your spirit has been aggressively tackling across this timeline and dozens of lifetimes prior. The maddening pattern continues to manifest in your reality not because you are fundamentally broken, but because your relentless higher self will continue to violently shove it onto your path until the equation is finally solved. It will reappear until the hidden lesson is completely extracted and integrated until the vital psychological expansion it demands has successfully occurred. Naturally, absorbing this perspective does not magically cause your deepest traumas and patterns to instantly vaporize into thin air. However, it permanently alters the way you interface with them, suddenly making true, lasting resolution a tangible possibility. You permanently cease fighting a losing war against your own cycles and instead begin actively collaborating with them. You abandon the agonizing victim mindset of asking, "Why on earth does this keep happening to me?" And you elevate your consciousness to ask, "What exact cosmic lesson is this situation demanding I master?" You stop desperately attempting to escape the brutal classroom of life, and you start engaging with the syllabus head-on, armed with the ironclad understanding that confronting the fire is the absolute only way to walk through it. The second profound transformation directly impacts your relationship with your own innate brilliance and natural gifts. The vast majority of humanity maintains a deeply toxic, complicated dynamic with their own talents. They constantly downplay their abilities, take their natural genius for granted, harbor a vague sense of imposter syndrome, or simply distrust their own power because it seems to flow too effortlessly to be considered earned. Society has aggressively programmed us to believe that if a skill comes naturally, it somehow doesn't count, that only achievements birthed from excruciating, soul-crushing struggle hold any legitimate value. This toxic conditioning breeds a tragic irony. The very supernatural talents your eternal soul has spent multiple lifetimes painstakingly refining, the precise genius you incarnated on this earth to generously share with humanity, become the exact tools you are most terrified to fully claim and aggressively wield. However, the moment you firmly plant your feet on the other side of this gateway, that self-sabotaging narrative shatters completely. You awaken to the undeniable fact that your breathtaking gifts and effortless talents are absolutely not random genetic flukes or lucky accidents. Those profound abilities are absolutely not the arbitrary result of incredibly good luck in some cosmic genetic lottery, nor are they merely the byproduct of fortunate circumstances in your current timeline. They are the concrete, irrefutable, accumulated achievements of your ancient soul meticulously gathered across the staggering entirety of its cosmic journey. Consider every past incarnation where your spirit obsessively dedicated itself to mastering a highly specific craft, where it painstakingly developed an extraordinary cognitive capacity, or where it deepened an obscure, intuitive method of knowing. Every single ounce of that grueling ancient labor is vividly present and hyperactive inside of you right now, manifesting in this very lifetime as an effortless, natural facility. It shows up as the precise task you can execute flawlessly while everyone around you struggles and stumbles. It reveals itself as the sudden, profound understanding that drops into your mind with zero intellectual effort, or as the innate superpower that has lingered quietly within you since childhood, patiently waiting for you to possess the courage to recognize it for the divine instrument it truly is. When you finally begin to perceive your unique gifts through this elevated lens, recognizing them as your immortal soul's hard-won, accumulated triumphs, and understanding them as the highly specific, customized contribution you have been actively preparing to deliver across multiple centuries, your entire posture changes. You permanently stop minimizing your brilliance. You completely cease apologizing for your power. You stop desperately waiting for external, societal permission to utilize your talents at maximum capacity. You realize with absolute clarity that wielding your gifts fully and unapologetically is absolutely not a display of ego or arrogance. It is pure, unfiltered fulfillment. It represents the triumphant completion of a massive, sweeping arc of spiritual development spanning epochs. In truth, it is the fundamental reason your higher self deliberately selected this specific, chaotic lifetime to weaponize those exact, ancient gifts in order to confront and resolve the highly specific challenges plaguing this precise, critical moment in human history. The third colossal paradigm shift radically completely alters your relationship to your interpersonal connections. The moment you internalize the reality that the central characters defining your narrative are, in fact, the eternal counterparts you have intimately traveled with before ancient souls with whom you drafted pre-incarnational contracts, whose own spiritual ascensions are violently intertwined with yours, the staggering depth and agonizing complexity of those bonds suddenly becomes navigable in an entirely new dimension. The individual who consistently pushes you to your absolute breaking point is no longer viewed merely as an unbearable antagonist. They are recognized as a devoted soul who agreed to play the necessary, grueling role of the villain to catalyze your spiritual evolution. The person who showers you with the most unconditional, overwhelming love transforms from a mere lucky encounter into an eternal companion who has been fiercely adoring you across a multitude of lifetimes, a love whose roots reach far deeper and are vastly older than this single, fleeting rendezvous. And perhaps most profoundly, the person who inflicted the most devastating, earth-shattering trauma upon your heart ceases to be merely a source of victimhood. They are recontextualized as a master teacher. They are an eternal spirit who, operating from an elevated plane of consciousness that neither of you can easily access while in human form, specifically volunteered to provide the exact agonizing friction your soul desperately required in order to force the massive psychological growth it needed to achieve. Let me be unequivocally clear. Recognizing this cosmic contract absolutely does not mean you must excuse their toxic behavior or validate the harm they caused. This spiritual truth is never an invitation to remain trapped in abusive, destructive situations. Pre-incarnational soul agreements are not binding contracts that demand you sacrifice your mental health or physical well-being in this current dimension. They are strictly evolutionary collaborations designed solely to serve growth. In fact, sometimes the absolute highest, most evolutionarily advanced action you can possibly take is to firmly recognize when a specific karmic collaboration has successfully exhausted its purpose and to aggressively release that individual from your reality with firm boundaries and distant love. However, acquiring this profound cosmic context entirely transmutes the meaning behind the relationship. It alchemizes the agonizing wound into deep, unshakable wisdom. It converts the chaotic, suffocating confusion into razor-sharp clarity. It forcefully shifts the entire narrative from an experience that is passively happening to you into a divine orchestration that is purposefully happening for you, perfectly aligned with the exact evolutionary mandate your ancient soul descended to this planet to accomplish. The fourth, and arguably the most profound, structural shift fundamentally rewrites your relationship with the concept of time itself. This is perhaps the most subtle of the transformations, yet its impact is earth-shattering. Prior to crossing this threshold, the human mind perceives time as a suffocating, linear, single-lane highway. You are born, you travel forward, and you die. A definitive beginning rushing toward an absolute end. Within this claustrophobic framework, everything that possesses any meaning or value must be frantically accomplished within this one brief biological span. Under this illusion, every single loss is deemed devastatingly final. Every ending is viewed as an absolute, unrecoverable tragedy. Every missed opportunity is believed to be permanently deleted from existence, never to return. Operating under this linear relationship to time generates a highly toxic, pervasive quality of baseline anxiety and frantic urgency. It fosters the suffocating sensation that the clock is constantly running out, that there is never enough time, and that the stakes of every single decision are cataclysmically high because there are 0 second chances. It cements the belief that the heartbreaks and failures of this lifetime are permanent, irreversible scars, But once you successfully transition to the other side of this gate, the architecture of time completely unravels and rebuilds itself into something vastly different. Time does not become less real or less important, but its scope becomes infinitely larger and more breathable. You finally grasp that your current timeline is absolutely not the only opportunity you possess. It is merely the current, gripping chapter of a sprawling, multi-volume cosmic epic. The ambitious projects or dreams that remain unfinished when your current heart stops beating will seamlessly be carried forward into the next iteration. The complex, messy relationships that lacked closure in this dimension will absolutely be encountered and resolved on future battlefields. The specific spiritual growth that was only partially achieved will be fiercely continued. This expansive perspective is emphatically not a hall pass for spiritual laziness or complacency. The eternal soul takes the assignment of each individual incarnation incredibly seriously, and the specific evolutionary workload designated for this current lifetime remains critically important. However, the suffocating, paralyzing anxiety generated by the one-life-only timeline completely evaporates. It softens drastically because you finally comprehend that you are not in a desperate, panicked foot race against a final, apocalyptic deadline. You are simply moving fluidly through a single, fascinating chapter of a staggeringly long, ancient manuscript, and the book is nowhere near finished. Furthermore, this radical shift in how you perceive time completely alters your relationship with the ultimate human terror, death, because from the elevated vantage point on the other side of this gate, biological death is no longer feared as a catastrophic ending. It is recognized purely as a crossing. It is absolutely not the permanent termination of the self. It is merely a functional transition, a necessary threshold, a brilliant gateway facilitating the smooth movement of pure consciousness from one state of existence into the next. The magnificent, vibrating consciousness that constitutes your true identity definitively does not terminate when your physical heart beats for the final time. Instead, it executes a flawless, deliberate crossing. It gracefully transitions into the sacred interlife dimension. There, it conducts a meticulous life review, seamlessly integrates the hard-won wisdom, deliberately blueprints its next cosmic assignment, and eventually returns to the physical plane. Yes, it is true that the highly specific biological configuration of your current incarnation, the physical face staring back at you in the mirror, the constructed personality you have carefully built, and the exact arrangement of earthly circumstances you currently navigate will permanently dissolve. That specific avatar will not endure. However, the eternal spark animating that flesh, the pure consciousness observing the world through those eyes, and the unbroken evolutionary thread actively weaving its way through your current timeline, that immortal essence absolutely continues. It steps boldly through the cosmic gate and materializes on the opposing side, profoundly transformed, infinitely deepened, and fiercely more authentic. When this profound realization is not merely nodded at as an intellectual theory, but is authentically integrated into your cellular memory, it aggressively annihilates the paralyzing, existential terror that serves as the root cause of so much human suffering. This is not achieved through psychological denial or desperately clutching at comforting fairy tales. It is achieved through the raw, unfiltered recognition of what you fundamentally are. Let me remind you of the ultimate cosmic truth. You are not merely a fragile biological organism desperately hoping to possess a spirit. You are an immense, ancient soul that is temporarily orchestrating a human experience. And rest assured, this magnificent soul of yours has been flawlessly navigating these terrifying thresholds for eons. It possesses the inherent, divine muscle memory required to cross over. It already knows exactly how to make the journey. At this precise juncture, we must pause to confront the elephant in the room. I am acutely aware that many of you currently hovering at the edge of this gateway are experiencing a sudden, violently rising tide of internal resistance. Understand that this friction is entirely deliberate. It is not arbitrary static. It is a highly specific psychological defense mechanism This pushback typically manifests in one of three distinct forms, and I must aggressively name them right now, because shining a light on the architecture of your resistance is the mandatory first step to dismantling it. The first form of resistance, the rational mind's rebellion. The absolute first manifestation of resistance is the desperate, rational objection. This is the loud, cynical voice of your ego screaming, "This is impossible to verify. There is zero concrete proof. This is nothing but romanticized, wishful thinking." This reaction is simply your analytical mind desperately attempting to shield itself from the terrifying, paradigm-shattering disorientation of a total worldview collapse. And let me be clear, I honor that skeptical voice. It is perfectly valid to demand empirical evidence. But the stark reality is that the evidence absolutely exists, and it is overwhelming. I referenced it earlier in our transmission. Dr. Ian Stevenson's 3,000 rigorously authenticated case studies, Dr. Jim Tucker's relentless academic continuation, Dr. Michael Newton's exhaustive hypnotic regression data, the massive repository of clinical near-death experience literature, and the unbreakable quantum physics principles regarding the strict conservation of information. The data is staring us in the face. When the skeptical mind finally summons the courage to authentically review this mountain of research, its rigid objections inevitably begin to melt. They soften not because the data represents a flawless mathematical theorem etched in stone, but because the sheer, crushing volume and the eerie, universal consistency of these accounts spanning across isolated cultures, crossing centuries, and utilizing vastly different methodologies makes maintaining a posture of arrogant dismissal increasingly impossible to honestly sustain. The second form of resistance, the terror of the dark archive. The second archetype of resistance is far more insidious and drastically more common. It is the sheer, paralyzing terror of what you might actually uncover. It is the trembling, shadowed fragment of your psyche that secretly hopes to remain ignorant of its ancient origins. This fear stems from a haunting suspicion that your past life narrative might not be a heroic, glorious fairy tale. You are terrified that your soul's vast archive might contain horrific chapters that are deeply agonizing to integrate, chapters filled with unspeakable violence, catastrophic failures, devastating losses, or active complicity in the suffering of others. Let me validate that fear. It is completely understandable. Your soul's grand cosmic history is absolutely not a carefully curated, sanitized social media highlight reel. It encapsulates the absolute, brutal totality of the human spectrum. In order to achieve the monumental spiritual expansion your soul possesses today, it was required to navigate the darkest trenches of human existence. Throughout its thousands of incarnations, your spirit has played every conceivable role. You have been the ruthless oppressor inflicting pain, and you have been the innocent victim enduring it. You have been the glorious victor who conquered the world, and the tragic failure who lost everything. You have been the brave pioneer who stepped through the unknown, and the terrified coward who retreated into the shadows. None of this is cause for debilitating shame. This is simply the brutal, necessary alchemy of a genuine evolutionary journey. The ultimate goal is not to discover that your soul's history is flawlessly pure. The objective is to realize that it is irrevocably yours. Unearthing that history, especially the darkest, most agonizing chapters, is infinitely more valuable than remaining blind to it. Why? Because those agonizing, unresolved chapters dictate precisely where your unfinished spiritual homework lies. And finalizing that terrifying, unfinished business is the exact reason your soul plummeted back to earth in this current lifetime. The third form of resistance, the dread of the void. The third and final form of resistance is undoubtedly the most agonizingly paradoxical of them all. It is the creeping, quiet dread that none of this is actually real. It is the horrifying thought that you might bravely peer into the cosmic void and find absolutely nothing staring back. It is the fear that you possess zero prior history, that you are strictly limited to this single, meaningless biological lifespan, that your desperate yearning for cosmic continuity is just a pathetic psychological coping mechanism, and that the cold, dark emptiness beneath it all represents the ultimate, terrifying truth. This specific fear is almost always the most crippling, because it is not merely a worry about reincarnation, it is an existential panic attack regarding the very fundamental nature of your own existence. It is the suffocating fear that at your core, you are not something eternal, permanent, and inherently divine. It is the terror that the consciousness you perceive as yourself is nothing more than a random, temporary collision of biological matter destined to rot and dissolve into dust, leaving absolutely zero trace behind. To anyone actively battling this crushing nihilistic terror right now, I want to deliver a message directly to your spirit. That very fear you are feeling is, in itself, the evidence you are looking for. The desperate, aching longing in your chest is the proof. The profound yearning for spiritual continuity. The unshakable intuition that you are vaster than a single timeline. The visceral shock of recognition when you stumble upon certain ancient truths, the vivid nighttime visions that carry the heavy density of lived memories, and those bizarre, illogical magnetic pulls and intense aversions. Absolutely none of these phenomena are random glitches or meaningless static in your biological hardware. They are deliberate, blazing signal flares. They are the undeniable, heavy footprints of your soul's massive historical archive, aggressively breaking through the psychological barricades, bleeding directly into your present waking awareness. The sheer reality that you can vividly feel these anomalies pulsating inside of you may not instantly hand you a perfectly drafted biography of your past, but it serves as indisputable, concrete evidence that a magnificent, ancient presence resides within you, an eternal entity violently pushing against the veil, desperately demanding to finally be seen, acknowledged, and understood. The actual, disciplined practice of navigating this cosmic doorway of authentically confronting the profound mystery of your soul's prior incarnations is fundamentally an exercise in deep, radical listening. It is absolutely not an invitation for your ego to run wild, fabricating grandiose, self-aggrandizing fairy tales about being a famous historical monarch just to make your current mundane reality feel more important. Rather, it is the raw, silent art of tuning into the ancient signals actively bleeding through the veil. It is about humbly and courageously following the energetic thread that your immortal consciousness is physically dragging into this timeline. I promise you, that thread is undeniably real. It has been woven into your existence since the moment you took your first breath, and the sole reason you are standing before this monumental gateway right now is that a buried, ancient fragment of your psyche already recognizes this truth. Take a deliberate pause in this moment and cast your awareness outward. Is there a specific individual in your inner circle who is currently hovering at the agonizing edge of their own cosmic precipice? Someone who is desperately pushing against the suffocating constraints of their mundane narrative, actively feeling the massive, terrifying weight of their true spiritual nature pushing back against them? Imagine the profound relief and validation they would experience simply knowing they are not descending into madness alone. I urge you to name them in the comments below, or even more powerfully, bypass the algorithms and send this exact transmission directly to their inbox. Your conscious, deliberate recognition of their spiritual threshold is, in itself, a magnificent act of crossing, and we will circle back to the profound mechanics of that phenomenon very soon. Before we initiate the final descent of this crossing, we must aggressively dissect what ancient wisdom traditions refer to as the soul's ultimate purpose. This is the highly specific, ironclad evolutionary mandate that your spirit deliberately smuggled into this biological form. Make no mistake, this is the most brutally practical, grounded dimension of everything we have explored today, and it will directly dictate how you architect your reality from this exact second onward. Every single soul plummets into the physical plane armed with a non-negotiable mission. I am not talking about the fluffy, generalized New Age platitudes of "you are just here to spread love" or "you are here to learn how to be happy." While those sentiments are lovely and technically true, they lack the surgical precision of your actual mission. Your soul arrived in this specific body carrying a highly customized, rigorous evolutionary curriculum. It brought a specific payload of ancient wisdom to distribute, and a specific set of complex, agonizing lessons to master. It arrived holding a specific thread it intends to advance. And here is the brutal truth. That sacred agenda is not intentionally hidden from you by some cruel cosmic trick. It is glaringly obvious. It is heavily encoded within the very architecture of your daily existence. It screams at you through the magnetic pulls that draw you to certain obsessions, the relentless cyclical themes of your life, the effortless supernatural gifts you wield, and the excruciating emotional lacerations you have survived. It lives perfectly at the precise, volatile intersection of exactly who you are, combined with when and where you incarnated on this earth. The existential question is absolutely not, does my soul possess a deeper purpose in this lifetime? It unquestionably does. The terrifying question you must confront is, are you actually executing it? Are you living in fierce alignment with it? Is the daily reality you are physically constructing actually corresponding to the grand, evolutionary blueprint your spirit dragged across the cosmos? This is precisely where the esoteric excavation of your past lives suddenly transforms into an urgently practical, operational tool. Because the vast, sweeping history of your ancient soul provides the exact missing context required to decode your present-day assignment. The effortless genius and natural gifts you possess today are the hardened diamonds your soul painstakingly compressed over a dozen past lifetimes. The agonizing psychological wound you are desperately trying to heal right now is the exact same karmic laceration your spirit has been attempting to stitch closed for centuries. The explosive intersection of your greatest cosmic gift and your deepest ancient trauma forms the absolute nucleus of your current life's purpose. It dictates the highly specific, unique medicine that only you are qualified to administer to humanity. Born equally from your vast capacity and your profound suffering, that precise intersection is exactly what you descended to this planet to accomplish. Once you tear off the blindfold, once you genuinely stride across the threshold and comprehend how your soul's sprawling historical archive directly architects your current earthly mission, the chaotic puzzle of how to navigate your daily life snaps into brilliant, undeniable focus. This revelation won't magically automate your mundane daily choices, but it will gift you an unbreakable internal compass. You will finally possess absolute clarity regarding the ultimate trajectory of your existence. You will understand precisely what grand design your life is actively serving, and fueled by that unshakable certainty, navigating the chaotic maze of career choices, toxic relationships, daily adversities, and mundane obligations becomes effortlessly manageable in a way that was previously impossible. This is the ultimate, magnificent treasure waiting at the gate. It is not about hoarding a collection of entertaining campfire stories regarding who you might have been in ancient Rome or Egypt. It is about unlocking the terrifying, liberating clarity of exactly who you are today, exactly why you are breathing in this moment, and the exact monumental task you came here to execute. Your past lives merely provide the cosmic context. Your present incarnation is the active purpose. And without understanding the context, the true purpose remains forever invisible. If you can physically feel this transmission resonating within your nervous system right now, if you can feel your fingers gripping this ancient thread, watching the colossal narrative of your true existence finally become decipherable, and you are desperate to dive infinitely deeper into the literal quantum mechanics of how frequency, alignment, and threshold manipulation actively forge reality, I have something for you. There is a highly specialized manual engineered for this exact stage of your awakening. It is called the Sealed Timeline. This blueprint meticulously maps out the complete 5-stage evolutionary sequence, ranging from the initial brutal diagnosis of your spiritual dissonance through the agonizing collapse of your false ego, navigating the terrifying crossing itself, and culminating in the impenetrable state of sealed coherence. This is the ultimate echelon where your energetic auric field becomes completely bulletproof, utterly untouched by any toxic frequencies or parasitic narratives that do not belong in your sovereign timeline. You will find the direct portal to this guide located in the description below. And now, As we prepare to close this circuit, there is something profoundly intimate I need to communicate directly to the buried, exhausted fragment of your spirit that has been desperately waiting in the dark. I need you to listen closely to that quiet, persistent echo within you. I am speaking directly to that hidden, exhausted fragment of your spirit that has stubbornly insisted, despite all societal conditioning and logical programming, that you are infinitely vaster than the narrow chronological confines this single lifetime presented. I am talking to the part of your psyche that has ached with a desperate, unquenchable thirst for a grander cosmic narrative. The part of you that has endured those jarring, unexplainable flashes of magnetic resonance, the nighttime visions that carry the undeniable, heavy density of lived history, the jarring shock of deep familiarity when standing in foreign environments, the colossal emotional traumas that clearly bleed beyond the borders of your current biography, and the supernatural aptitudes that seem to miraculously erupt from a hidden, ancient reservoir deep within your DNA. I am here to look you in the eyes and validate that feeling. That deeply buried fragment of your intuition was absolutely, unequivocally right. You are vastly more than this brief biological lifespan. You have always been more than this single avatar. The majestic, immortal entity that constitutes your true identity has been tirelessly navigating the vast oceans of existence for an incomprehensible stretch of time. You have spent eons aggressively conquering thresholds, stepping through terrifying cosmic gateways, and emerging on the opposing side irrevocably altered, infinitely deepened, and constantly propelling yourself forward. You have been relentlessly marching toward an ultimate evolutionary zenith that a fragile, single lifetime perspective simply does not possess the optical capacity to perceive. Furthermore, your arrival at this exact digital coordinate, at this precise moment in human history, is emphatically not a byproduct of random chance, algorithmic luck, or meaningless coincidence. The profound reality that this specific inquiry tracked you down, that this transmission successfully penetrated your reality, and that something deep within your chest violently recognized the architecture of this gateway and instinctively leaned toward it. That is pure, unfiltered spiritual physics. That is the supreme, subterranean intelligence of your own eternal soul actively operating beneath the radar of your waking ego. It is your higher self intentionally dragging you toward the exact cosmic recognition you are finally mature enough to handle. It has been meticulously guiding you toward this monumental crossing for the entirety of your current incarnation, steering you directly to the threshold that has been patiently standing wide open, waiting for your energetic frequency to perfectly match the vibration of the truth waiting on the other side. You are hovering at the gate right now. In fact, you have been standing in its blinding light throughout the entirety of this transmission. The monumental crossing, the literal, irreversible quantum mutation from perceiving yourself as a disposable mortal to violently awakening as an eternal, multi-dimensional titan is available to you at this very second. This is not a distant, theoretical possibility reserved for some future enlightened state. It does not require decades of ascetic meditation, an avalanche of empirical proof, or the complete eradication of all your human doubts. It is accessible right now, in this exact breath, provided you possess one single crucial element: willingness. The gateway itself is constructed entirely of your willingness to surrender. The mechanism of crossing does not demand that you possess a flawless, chronological spreadsheet of your past incarnations before taking a step. You do not need to achieve absolute psychological certainty, nor do you need to successfully conquer every single rational objection your terrified ego throws at you. You simply need the raw, courageous, profoundly humble willingness to gaze into the terrifying abyss of the unknown, fully accepting that you have no idea what ancient truths will stare back at you, and making the conscious decision to look anyway. That fierce willingness to let the inquiry dismantle you is the exact mechanism that propels you through the door, because you must understand. The inquiry of who was my soul before this life is absolutely not a trivial piece of metaphysical trivia that you solve once and neatly file away in a mental cabinet. It is a breathing, radioactive, living paradigm. The moment you genuinely invite this question into your nervous system, it begins to violently and continuously reorganize your entire perception of reality. It operates as a perpetual engine of revelation. It is an inquiry that relentlessly peels back new, breathtaking layers of your identity. It constantly injects fresh, cosmic context into your daily struggles, forcefully clarifying your earthly mission and endlessly expanding your comprehension of exactly what you are and why you are breathing on this planet. In the most absolute literal sense, this is a point of no return threshold. It is a one-way cosmic valve, because the instant you actually step through this gateway, the illusion crumbles permanently. On the other side of this realization exists a newly minted version of yourself, a sovereign being who implicitly knows it is immortal. And once you authentically absorb that terrifying, magnificent reality, the fragile, single-life version of your ego is permanently deleted. The gate slams shut behind you. The bridge combusts, and you are forced to march forward carrying the staggering weight, the immense responsibility, and the breathtaking power of every single thing you have ever been. This is the ultimate crossing. This is precisely the mission you signed up for when you descended to Earth. Now, I must urgently direct your attention to the vast, invisible community of spirits who are actively making this exact same crossing right alongside you, because I need you to understand that you are absolutely not navigating this terrifying void alone. At this exact millisecond, there is a global constellation of thousands of awakening humans who are standing paralyzed at this identical gateway. They are individuals who have suffered the exact same agonizing longing for depth. They have endured the same baffling, unexplainable energetic resonances, and they have been aggressively pushing back against the suffocating limitations of the mundane societal narrative, feeling the massive weight of their true cosmic history pushing right back at them. These are your people. I do not mean this in a casual, superficial sense of like-minded individuals sharing a niche hobby online. I mean this in the most profound, esoteric sense. These are your eternal counterparts. You are a collective of ancient souls who are mutually navigating the exact same evolutionary choke point in the timeline of human history. When sprawling networks of souls confront an identical spiritual boundary and begin to recognize one another, a monumental energetic phenomenon occurs. Quantum physicists define this behavioral anomaly as quantum entanglement. Ancient mystical traditions label it as harmonic resonance. The ordinary human heart simply recognizes it as an overwhelming flash of deep familiarity. Whatever terminology you prefer, the result is identical. It massively amplifies the power of the crossing. Stepping into the terrifying unknown becomes infinitely more manageable when you can physically feel the energetic presence of a spiritual legion stepping into the void right beside you. Therefore, if the frequency of this transmission has successfully pierced your armor today, if this relentless investigation into the ancient origins of your soul has ignited something undeniably real within your chest, I am extending a blank, formal invitation to you. I invite you to drag that realization out of the shadows and into the light. Drop down into the comments right now and declare your presence. Share the specific resonances that violently stirred within you. Articulate the hidden truths that suddenly recognize themselves. Do not worry about sounding poetic or perfectly coherent. Even if it is messy, fractured, and imperfect, I urge you to explicitly name exactly what you felt the moment you stood before the gate. I am urging you to speak up, not because voicing this truth validates it or magically makes it real. The reality of your infinite nature is an absolute fact, regardless of whether you acknowledge it. But when you actively name it, when you force the abstract cosmic sensation into the tangible structure of human language, and when you generously present that vulnerability to the thousands of others currently paralyzed at this exact same boundary, you engage in a profound act of spiritual integration. This public declaration is the precise mechanism by which the crossing officially finalizes itself. It is the energetic glue that allows this elevated state of consciousness to permanently stabilize within your nervous system. It is the definitive sound of the cosmic gate slamming shut and locking behind you, cementing this expansive new reality as the absolute, undisputed dimension you now inhabit. So, I invite you, tell the community exactly what you uncovered while standing before the threshold. Describe the ancient frequencies that violently stirred within your chest. Detail the specific fragments of your true identity that miraculously recognized themselves while listening to this transmission. Understand that your public recognition is not a selfish act of self-expression. It functions as a blazing beacon. It is a critical distress signal broadcasted into the dark for all the other souls currently trembling at the edge of the abyss, terrified that they are losing their minds, wondering if they are the only ones experiencing this profound dissonance. Your raw willingness to articulate the terrifying, beautiful truth you discovered serves as an act of immense spiritual bravery, a courage that actively smooths the terrain, making the treacherous crossing significantly less agonizing for every single traveler who follows in your footsteps. Now, we must aggressively pivot our focus to the crucial mechanics of integration. You must realize that simply stepping through the portal does not mean the journey is complete. The crossing is only officially finalized when your newly expanded state of consciousness permanently anchors itself into your daily reality. The crossing is complete only when the staggering realization that you are an ancient soul wielding a massive historical archive ceases to be a fascinating philosophical thought experiment and mutates into a breathing, undeniable, lived reality. It is complete when you open your eyes every morning, and the fundamental definition of who I am automatically encompasses the sprawling, majestic arc of every single incarnation you have ever experienced. It is stabilized when you confront your toxic patterns, utilize your effortless gifts, and navigate the agonizing complexities of your interpersonal relationships, armed with the unshakable understanding that these elements are architected by forces far older and vaster than this single timeline. Integration is achieved when every mundane, earthly choice you make is meticulously filtered through the hyper-focused lens of the exact evolutionary mandate your spirit deliberately carried onto this planet. Integration is absolutely not a singular, cinematic event. It is a grueling, relentless, daily practice. And this practice requires mastery across 3 distinct dimensions. The first dimension, relentless, continued inquiry, the colossal mystery regarding the identity your soul possessed before this current incarnation cannot possibly be solved or exhausted in one single video transmission, a solitary hypnotherapy session, or one fleeting flash of profound realization. This is an inquiry that violently unravels over the span of a lifetime. It operates on a delayed release mechanism, constantly dispensing breathtaking new layers of cosmic context only at the precise moments your nervous system is biologically and spiritually prepared to withstand them. The disciplined practice of continued inquiry requires you to stubbornly camp out inside the question. You must continuously return to this mystery, deliberately planting the inquiry into your nightly dreamscape, utilizing it as the focal point of your meditation, and allowing it to echo during your moments of silence. You must allow the question to actively hunt you, trusting it to continually and violently reorganize your baseline understanding of your own existence. The second dimension, somatic embodiment. The intellectual comprehension of your soul's vast history is entirely useless unless it aggressively descends from the lofty realm of mental concepts and forcibly anchors itself into the dense, heavy reality of your physical flesh. The cosmic theory must become a biological truth. This grounding process occurs strictly through the physical body. It demands that you actively integrate this profound perspective into the literal, physical mechanics of how you navigate your daily environment. Embodiment happens when you finally stop apologizing for your innate, supernatural talents, and instead begin aggressively wielding those ancient gifts with lethal precision in your career and relationships. It happens when you completely reframe the narrative surrounding your chronic emotional traumas, recognizing them not as punishments, but as ancient battle scars you are finally meant to heal. Embodiment occurs when the unshakable awareness of your soul's ultimate evolutionary agenda violently dictates exactly how you spend your time, where you allocate your precious physical energy, who you allow into your energetic field, and what work you agree to perform. The integration remains incomplete until this cosmic comprehension fundamentally alters the physical actions you take. The intellectual knowing must transmute into cellular being. The third dimension, sovereign service. The ultimate revelation of your soul's ancient identity is emphatically not intended to be hoarded merely for your own personal comfort, spiritual entertainment, or egoic satisfaction. The clarity you receive is meant to be weaponized. It is fuel designed to power the specific, monumental contribution you were stationed on this earth to execute. The breathtaking genius, the unique talents, and the profound wisdom your eternal spirit has painfully cultivated over thousands of lifetimes were never meant solely for your own private fulfillment. They are precision tools engineered for the highly specific act of service your soul was deployed here to administer to humanity. Consequently, the integration of your ancient cosmic history is utterly void until that act of service goes live. The process is only complete when those ancient gifts are being actively deployed on the battlefield of life, when your divine evolutionary mandate is being aggressively executed, and when the exact, unyielding purpose your soul dragged into this specific timeline is finally being manifested into the physical world. This, my friends, is the grand, sprawling architecture of the complete crossing. It encompasses the terrifying pause while standing at the threshold, the intellectual dismantling of what the gate truly represents, the violent courage required to step through it, the awe of arriving on the opposing side, the grueling, daily discipline of integrating the new reality, and finally, the triumphant act of living fully from that sovereign posture. Every single one of these stages represents its own brutal threshold. Every phase is a gateway in its own right, and I assure you, you will conquer every single one of them using the exact same fierce determination and spiritual muscle memory you have utilized to shatter every other boundary throughout your soul's unfathomably long existence. You will navigate this one grueling step at a time, fueled by the unshakable, terrifying courage that is born from the absolute certainty that you have done this all before. Because you have done this before, you have stood paralyzed before the terrifying gates of the unknown in ancient centuries past. You have physically felt this exact, highly charged, electric density in the atmosphere mere seconds before making a cosmic leap. You are intimately familiar with the paralyzing resistance, the agonizing longing, the suffocating uncertainty, and the explosive, weeping flash of recognition. You have stepped through the void. You have successfully materialized on the other side. You have successfully integrated the terrifying new reality into your being, and you have consistently marched forward vastly deeper, infinitely more powerful, and fiercely more authentic than you ever were before. This moment right now, it is simply another one of those legendary crossings, and you are undeniably ready for it. The sheer fact that your physical eyes are absorbing these words right now is the ultimate, irrefutable evidence that you are prepared to step through. The sheer reality that this profound inquiry provoked a visceral, undeniable reaction within your physical vessel is the ultimate, irrefutable proof of your spiritual readiness. The fact that you did not click away in fear, that you bravely endured the weight of this entire transmission, permitted its heavy frequency to dismantle your psychological defenses, and deliberately marched your consciousness right up to the edge of the abyss with absolute, genuine willingness that is the only evidence the universe requires. The cosmic gateway is wide open. It has been silently waiting ajar this entire time, and it will patiently remain unlocked for exactly as long as your spirit needs to make the jump. There is absolutely zero ticking clock here. There is no frantic, earthly pressure demanding you perform. There is only a pure, razor-sharp, highly customized invitation extending its hand to you. An invitation to finally grant yourself the permission to exist as something infinitely more majestic than this single, fleeting biological lifespan. It is a divine permission slip to unlock the sprawling, monumental arc of your true identity, allowing the dense, ancient history of your soul to brilliantly illuminate the exact purpose you are meant to execute today. It is the ultimate invitation to surrender to the current and simply let the great crossing commence. I want you to recognize a fundamental, structural truth regarding what just occurred. The specific version of your ego that arrived at the beginning of this transmission no longer exists. A fundamentally mutated, vastly expanded iteration of your consciousness is what is leaving it. The individual who arrived here perceived themselves through a microscopic lens, trapped within the suffocating confines of a single biological body, limited by a brief chronological history, and defined entirely by a random assortment of earthly circumstances and interpersonal dramas. However, the sovereign entity that is currently departing this space perceives itself through a macroscopic, cosmic lens. You now understand that you are an immortal traveler embarked on a breathtaking expedition. You recognize yourself as a hardened, seasoned consciousness that has been expertly breaching terrifying spiritual thresholds for epochs. You are the living, breathing culmination of the vast wisdom and evolutionary triumphs harvested from every single lifetime that preceded this exact moment. You are a sovereign being intentionally dragging its entire cosmic archive forward into the present tense, weaponizing it, living authentically from it, and generously offering its medicine to the world. That profound metamorphosis is the crossing. That is the exact alchemical reaction that has just taken place within your nervous system. And let me be brutally clear, there is absolutely no retreating from this point. A one-way cosmic valve has been triggered. This is not because your former, limited perspective has been violently eradicated. Your earthly ego still exists. It remains a highly useful, practical instrument required to navigate the mundane, logistical details of your daily human existence. However, it is no longer the absolute authority. It is no longer the largest conceptual framework available to your mind. Now that you reside on the opposing side of this gate, you have expanded into a state of magnitude that makes returning to the tiny, claustrophobic box of your old life mathematically impossible. You simply cannot unknow your own vastness. The threshold is now firmly positioned behind you. The haunting question regarding who your soul was before you took your first breath is no longer a piece of abstract, intellectual trivia. It has transmuted into a glowing, living thread securely gripped in your hands. It is an unbreakable energetic tether linking you directly to everything you have ever been, the totality of what you currently are, and the magnificent, terrifying entity you are rapidly evolving into. It is the master thread weaving its way through the tapestry of every century you have survived, every boundary you have shattered, and every single gateway you have bravely crossed throughout the agonizing, beautiful evolution of your eternal spirit. Whenever you encounter a profound moment of heavy silence in the future, or when you inevitably find yourself trembling before a brand new personal threshold in your own life, consider this specific transmission a sacred sanctuary worth returning to. Furthermore, if there is a specific individual in your orbit who is actively agonizing at the edge of their own spiritual precipice right now, I implore you to send this directly to them. Do not offer it as a mere casual recommendation. Present it as a lifeline. Present it as a bridge. Because when you deliberately share a threshold-crossing transmission with a soul who is biologically ready to receive its frequency, you are not simply forwarding a digital video. You are aggressively expanding the quantum field of recognition. You are forcefully smoothing out their turbulent path, validating their inner knowing, and confirming that the terrifying gate they see is profoundly real, and that a legion of others have bravely stood on that exact same ledge. When this deep threshold recognition is mutually shared, the energetic fields of both the sender and the receiver are exponentially fortified and permanently strengthened. So, grip that ancient thread tightly and follow it blindly. It already possesses the map. It has always known its exact destination, and I promise you, the precise coordinate it is dragging you toward is exactly where your spirit desperately needs to be. The gateway is open. You have successfully made the crossing. Welcome to the breathtaking other side of the mystery. Welcome home to the colossal, unbounded version of yourself. Welcome to the absolute grand arc of your true cosmic identity. Now, go out into this world and live fiercely from